Welcome, everyone, to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast. I'm delighted to have Aaron Hearne with me today. So, Aaron, great to be with you today.
It's great to be here.
Good. So, Aaron and I have been connected recently through Sassy Venables. So, we're delighted. So, a big shout out to Sassy there as well. And Aaron, I know you've done some, met up with Sassy and had some really good conversations with her. So, big thank you to Sassy for introducing us, which is great.
Absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, she is a really, really lovely person. So, just to share with people, I've never met anyone before with an MBE. So, I've met Aaron. So, Aaron, you're my first person with an MBE. So, thank you ever so much for meeting you. But Aaron is passionate about volunteering, founder of the Liam charity, and NSPCC honorary member of council. So, it's great to have you on today because we're going to talk about all things culture today. In advance, Aaron has had 5 questions from me, as we always do with our kind of guests to give them a much prep. So, Aaron, shall we dive in on the first question?
Yes.
Fab. So, how do you personally define workplace culture? So, I'll start with that bit. We've got 2 parts of that question, but how would you personally define workplace culture?
I think for me, it's sort of patterns of everyday behaviour,
Yeah,
which essentially allows people to thrive, full, which is really important, and performance without fear.
yeah,
I think it's about the consistency within that. So it's like the micro moments that lead up to the bigger narrative, and not just what's on the piece of paper.
yeah,
When we look at workplace culture, we look at what the values of the organisation is, what the strategy is, and it's beyond the narrative that is put together within a structure.
yeah,
And I guess it's about how people feel about showing up to work.
yes,
Positive culture, people want to come into work, they want to sort of work together, they want to collaborate. It gives them real purpose. And obviously, negative culture has the opposite effect.
yes, yeah. And it's the bit there. We want people getting out of bed in the morning to actually come and give their best version of themselves. And I think going back to that bit where we work with people, if organisation and leaders do follow the narrative, the culture becomes a better place. Whereas if they're not following the narrative and values, then it becomes disjointed. People are confused what's going on, etc. And then we get mixed messages, and then people don't bring their best version of themselves to work. Would you find that from your experience as well, Aaron?
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's where leadership comes in quite poignantly. It's like do as I say and not as I do.
Yes,
And obviously, naturally, we have a natural instinct to sort of contextualize what's around us.
yes,
And it makes it really difficult if, there's certain behaviors within an organization that's being rewarded, which is a direct conflict of the cultural and the expectations.
yeah,
And then it kind of comes into this, why should I do it? Why should I
yes,
do it when everyone else is not doing it? So there's kind of like a golden thread through the organization where it's so valuable from top to bottom and bottom up,
yeah,
because culture is created fundamentally by the people who are within the environment.
yes,
And I think the more people that embed a positive culture,
yeah,
the more people it kind of like absorbs into the organization. But if there's more negative people,
yeah,
then the organization
yeah,
like bad apples, isn't it? It becomes more
correct.
negative.
Yeah. And I think the bit there is about rewarding the right behavior. So I know I come from a background where, bad behavior could be rewarded. And then
Yes.
it kind of breeds of, well, why should I do it? If you're going to only pay me this or do that, I'll only do it. So it defeats the object. And I remember when I left my banking industry, I was institutionalized. And I remember when I come into the what I call the outside world and realize people do want to help. And
Mhm.
actually, there's not anything in return, but there's a bit as a goodwill. And I think that's more what we want to try and create in workplaces is it's not always what I'm going to get in return. It's about actually what you offer to the workplace will be the rewarding part. Would that make sense to
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think sort of over time, like the approach and culture towards work has changed. I
Yeah,
think, before it was, be the first one in, the last one out, and work beyond your hours. And
yeah,
and that would be a premise of if you want to make it in the world, you have to be the person that's been seen all the time.
yes,
But fundamentally, this is where I think sort of like EDI and cultural differences come in place.
yeah,
Some people are just quietly getting on with their work, but making massive impact. And I think
yes,
moving from that shift of um, it's not the loudest person in the room,
yeah,
but it's, the most valuable person in the room gets the
correct.
reward. And I think society's changed now,
Yeah,
where the people in employment are like, actually I want more from my work because, essentially this is 50% of my existence, is 50%
Yes.
of my life. So
Yeah.
I think that's where organizations have to adapt and find
Yeah.
better ways to engage. And one of them is it's free. Culture's free if you do it the right way, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's where it's so fundamentally important. It costs nothing to be kind. It costs
Great.
nothing to be accountable.
Yeah. And isn't that powerful? The way you just lined up then and went, it's free. It's one of
Mm,
those ones that culture, and I say to people about like leadership, we're all leaders.
mm,
How we behave, how we come across. We don't have to manage teams, but we are all leaders of our behaviours and our brands, etc. And it doesn't cost a penny to lead with kindness, politeness, respect. And we may not always agree because that's constructive conflict. That's great. But
yeah,
actually, it's being heard and respecting people is super, super important. And I've worked with some wonderful people that were the most introverted, but the most impactful.
mm.
And I also think going back to, get in early, stay late, people have home lives and you could get more productivity from people if you respect them, let them have their home lives. They're coming to work with energy rather than drain them. And it's whoever stays late the longest gets the promotion, which is, so out of date.
Yeah, and I think reflecting on when we first spoke, it's quite poignant where, we have this kind of perception of there's work and there's home, but
Yeah.
there's a crossover.
Yeah.
As I said, like you have a bad day at work, then it bleeds into your home life, then you can't regenerate and come into work, and vice
Yeah.
versa. I think it's so much more than you coming in, doing an activity, giving
Yeah.
something to live. And again, it's all fundamental, it's all interlinked.
Yes.
And essentially, if you strip back the bare bones of everyone, we all have a soul which wants to
Yes.
be enlightened, engaged, enjoyed, and
Yeah.
work is a fundamental part of that.
Yeah, no, spot on, absolutely spot on. So, can you share a moment in your career when company culture directly influenced your performance? And it could be good or bad. So, can you think of a time when company culture really kind of influenced you?
Yeah, I think one of the most poignant, and I'm going to give a shout out to Lucy Kelly here.
Mm.
With I started working at a place after being made redundant, and it was due during COVID actually, and it was such a difficult time for everyone, and there was so much uncertainty and things like that.
Yeah.
But what within the organisation, and especially Lucy as my manager, created a space of togetherness. And
Yeah.
it's quite odd in the world where, people are divided, but then a certain catastrophe can bring us all together.
Yes.
And I think, we ally with things based on situations, not based on personal feelings,
Yeah.
in some instances. And I think it was so poignant for the success of
Yeah.
the organization that we came together, we strapped in and we were supporting each other. And it was such a magical moment because in times of uncertainty,
Yeah.
desperation, confusion, you can go one of two ways. People
Yes.
kind of go into this box of self-protection,
Yeah.
or people can go, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
Let's come together. Let's talk about why we're struggling beyond work as well.
Yeah.
Let's be transparent about our feelings, but also we've got a task to do here. Let's come together and do it. And
Yes.
against all the odds, everything was against the organisation to achieve what they needed to achieve. But by coming together and having that kind of one perspective, one kind of
Yeah.
goal, but also being human, we managed to successfully navigate a really difficult and challenging moment.
Yeah. And isn't it brilliant about you can go two ways, can't you? So a moment of truth, which we all experience, you can either bring people in and actually try to understand what's going on in their lives. And I always remember when I was speaking to a colleague during the pandemic, said, I'm in a one bedroom flat, I have a child, I'm trying to educate, I'm trying to do work, we can't go out. I mean, that's just horrific. But if people, and he said, you're the first person that's ever asked me, how are you? What's going on in
Mhm.
your world? And actually, it was great, it was a great moment. But they're the times that you need just to talk to somebody, isn't it, Aaron, to make sure that you feel comfortable, happy, and they get more from you, won't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I think again, it kind of goes down to being human as well. So my manager was human and vulnerable at that time, which then
Yeah.
gave me the pretext to be human and vulnerable, and
Yes.
therefore my team could be human and vulnerable.
Yeah.
And to mention like, during that time, I had members of staff that lived in like literally one bedroom. They had their
Yeah.
their 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 work there,
Yes.
their eating, their life, but in
Yeah.
shared accommodation. And that's so isolating because it's
Yes.
psychologically, having separate spaces
Yes.
is so important, and being even myself, like working in the bedroom and then having to switch off and sleep, like
Yes.
my body just didn't function that well in that time because
Yeah.
psychologically that was my space where I was wired and active, but I was then
Yes.
trying to be sedated and subdued, you know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah.
and again, and again that kind of I'm struggling to let's share, let's talk. I'm not
Yes.
alone
Yeah.
in a space where actually it was the loneliest time probably that
Yeah.
I've ever experienced in my life.
Yes. No, I agree. I agree. And the bit you and I spoke before, but many organisations talk about values. They talk about it, but struggle to live them daily. What practices or behaviours truly bring values to life? So a bit of a longer question.
Yeah, I think for me, I think values are part of like three areas. You've got the
Right.
values, which is like the intent, the behaviors, which is kind of the evidence of the values being absorbed, and then the culture is created from that.
Yeah.
But I think going back to what I said, it values is about sort of being consistent, but also
Yeah.
during that consistency, the people around you observe their behaviors, and
Yeah.
therefore they either mimic or they go against, depending on
Correct.
their personal values or depending on what their approach to work is.
Yeah.
And again, fundamentally, it goes to that element of what's the incentive to behave this way? What's the
Yeah.
consequence? And you mentioned before, like, if you're rewarding bad behavior,
Yeah.
then that's kind of we're all kind of, as human beings
Yeah.
conditioned to do, if I do this thing and it makes me feel good, or
Yeah.
if I do this thing and it makes me feel less bad, I'm going to continue doing that.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so again, it's kind of like making sure that we're consistent in our narrative, but also being representative of that throughout the business.
Yeah, and I think that's a phrase I used to say to people, and I still use it, is boringly consistent. Now, what I mean
Mhm.
is it's not being boring, but actually following through consistency. And I always remember that we all have our micro biases, and that, from that point of view, but actually in that leadership role or culture, you have to treat everybody fairly from that point of view. And the good organisations that we get to work with, you can really see that empathetic leadership that actually treats everybody the same, but still gives them time, quality of work, and those kind of stuff, really listens to them. But actually, there's not favouritism played out within it. So you can get a nice, consistent flow. Absolutely so powerful to see from a leader. Really, really powerful about consistency.
And I think just in terms of just the consistency of treatment sometimes is actually difference in application.
Correct.
Um, so, for me, I like, I've worked with one of the most incredibly diverse teams I've ever worked with.
Yeah.
But in terms of one of the mantras that I have is be accountable and
Yeah.
be honest. And different people are at different levels of accountability because their experience would be, well, actually, I was accountable that last this once, and my boss actually made me
Yeah.
told me off or thingy.
Yeah.
And we had this thing where I always said like if an error was made, we should go back to the point of inception. Because
Yes.
sometimes if you're in the delivery space and something goes wrong, you're normally blamed. But actually, if the pre-setup or the empowerment wasn't there, the
Yes.
mistake was inevitable. And we had this kind of culture of,
Yeah.
let's break it down into little bits.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, this big error became
Yes.
50% of what you did, but
Yeah.
actually we could then learn from that and then actually we can go
Yeah.
and fix things. So again, I was, we had this kind of thing where I made mistakes and I'd let the team
Yeah.
know if I had made a mistake, I'd be really open with it. And I go, hi guys, I made a mistake today.
Yeah.
Because then again, it gives them the opportunity to go, cool, so he's okay with it.
Yes.
I'm okay with it. I've
Yeah.
made a mistake. Last time I made a mistake with this manager, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
So then again, they're less susceptible to make mistakes, so there's less pressure. But when they
Yes.
do, they're honest and actually,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the way that I would like to be managed, and that's one of the
Yeah.
values that Lucy taught me,
Yeah.
and therefore I've taken that into my management style moving forward.
Yeah. And it's the bit there of saying to people, I like it when people go, do you know what? Hands up, that was me on that
Yeah,
one. And people go, oh, right. Whereas when people lie or fib or that kind of bit, it creates a different animosity. And then people start to become resentment, those kind of stuff. Whereas we're all human beings. I think there's definitely then the flip side of if you keep making the same mistake, you've got to take accountability for that. That makes sense. So the flip side as well.
Yeah, and I've had them conversations with employees which they keep making the same mistake. But we went through different conversations, but then them
Yes.
different conversations opened up different doors.
Yeah.
So and again, that's why I think as a manager, you should never go full in to an employee if they've made a mistake, because fundamentally you have to give them an opportunity to speak first,
Yeah.
rationalize, and then go. And I've been a part of these conversations where something's gone wrong, and my managers rang me, and they've given me like thrown the
Yeah.
book at me,
Yeah.
haven't given me an opportunity to speak, and then I've
Yes.
been
Yeah.
like, and then all of a sudden I'm like, well, actually. But I'm
Yeah.
already annoyed now because
Yes.
you've
Yeah.
come up to me. So then I've just lost total respect for you. But I'm going to
Yeah.
justify this, and it doesn't matter what you do now
Yeah.
because you've already made that prejudgment of me,
Correct.
and you've already made the mistake of actually
Yeah.
kind of not being understanding of all the things
Correct.
that I do, and
Yeah.
he's made it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think
Yeah.
I know kindness is sometimes underrated, and
Yeah.
also kindness and leadership is so many times, oh, it's weakness. You can't be too kind.
Yeah.
It's not. You kindness with barriers is a great balance of leadership, I think.
Correct. Yeah, and I think the way you just defined there is kindness with barriers is a super thing, because we can be kind in leadership, and actually kindness is about listening to the person where mistakes have happened. I love the bit there because I've come across it so many times where people have jumped in and made accusations or even pre-built the narrative, whereas actually we teach through our mediation work, walk in other people's shoes. Go and actually listen to them, try to seek to understand what's gone on. Then you can have a more accurate conversation. So yeah, this is fantastic, Aaron. Really good. So in your experience, how can teams maintain a structure during periods of rapid growth or restructuring or uncertainty? So how can teams really maintain that culture?
Yeah, I think partly it's about the pretext, it's about the pre-work. So
Yeah.
if you prior to this moment happening, have you
Yeah.
been consistent as a manager? Have you been transparent, open? Have you created a culture of sort of accountability within that? Because you're already way ahead.
Yes.
Because we're naturally as human beings in moments of uncomfortability, our
Yeah.
innate ability, an innate sort of kind of thing to do is protect.
Yes.
And that comes in different variations.
Yeah.
So what you're actually fighting at that moment is
Mm.
people's natural instincts against
Yeah.
the actual event that's happening. So again, if you've got a transparent culture, you can have conversations, people will be open and honest with
Yes.
you, and you can navigate through that with the best of knowledge rather than
Yes.
finding things out. And one thing, I said, like one of my mantras is if there's a problem, an issue, you've got three decisions to make. You can
Yeah.
talk to me and we can provide context and have a good conversation.
Yeah.
You can bottle it up and it will just harbor and fester,
Yeah.
or you can go and talk to other people not related, which then creates a negative narrative.
Yes.
And I'm always really honest with that, and it takes time for people to start doing that. But
Yeah.
equally, I will know instantly when something's gone wrong. So as long as I know then, I don't find out 2 weeks later. So it's
Yeah.
damage limitation. So
Yeah.
I think again, it's about what you do before that moment
Yeah.
will give you the best insights to then navigate things while they're happening.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's a great mantra about come. You can either come have a chat with me and let's just talk it through. Fester or it's going to build up with them, and usually when it festers like that, they're going to make more mistakes. That's usually inevitable from that point of view. Or we teach about people having what's called three versions of the truth. So they're only going to go and tell people what they want them to hear to either build allies or tribes, those kind of beings. So it is fascinating, but it's about being that human being. Is look, we all make mistakes. If something goes wrong, come and have a chat. Or if you need something, let's talk about it. And it won't be as bad as we let it grow or fester from that point of view.
And I think also it's that kind of narrative. When it's happening to you, it's always 100 million times worse, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
when I speak to friends and stuff like that, where they come to me and give advice and things like that, they're always like, you can't take your own advice sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's you have to appreciate that, it's it's the way you approach things. So
Yeah.
it's when someone's struggling and things like that, it's the line of questioning.
Yes.
And one of the key things I learned when I was doing my childline counselling is that it's not about going, it's going to be okay, it's going to be
Yeah.
fixed. It's a bit like someone breaks their leg and be like, just don't feel the pain.
Yes.
it's about
Yes.
asking questions. So, how does that make you feel? What would you like to happen? What could you do differently?
Yeah.
There's so much more softer questions, but
Yes.
actually you get so much more out of a human being.
Yeah.
And then what they can do is they can learn within.
Yeah.
And one of the other things, I'm just jumping between two things, is when I used to work with this absolutely amazing superstar of an employee, can't
Yeah.
fault them, intellect, passion, knowledge, but
Yeah.
then they had this self-doubt element of
Yeah.
them. And the way we kind of work through that is post-it notes. How do you feel before the thing happens? How do you
Yeah.
feel during, and how do you feel after? And then
Yeah.
what we did, we try to look at the two things, and
Yeah.
we kind of come to the conclusion is that actually context and perspective can completely change the narrative, especially when a mistake's been happened,
Yes.
uncertainty and things like that. And it's just kind of just approaching it in a more human way.
Yes.
Um, and that's probably
Yeah.
what a lot of things I've said. I always go back to just being human.
Yeah, and it's the bit there about that human being bit is treating people like adults, talking to them. But I also think about stating there is an issue or a problem and saying, look, we just need to talk about it. I always believe about nipping things in the bud, but there's ways of doing it rather than finger pointing, those kind of stuff. And I love the post-its of actually from like past, present, future, those kind of stuff. Absolutely fantastic. So if you could give leaders one piece of advice to transform their culture starting tomorrow, what would be your magic wand? What one piece of advice would you say?
Don't just listen here.
Oh,
Um,
cracking, yes.
Yeah. So I think not just culture in everything. Again, like no one knows the ins and outs of their life more than the person living it.
Yeah,
And think sometimes you can have conversations and you can listen, but
yeah,
hearing means you've actioned it.
yes,
And I think that's what I've experienced is that things will fester. So it's okay
yeah,
to kind of go, you've got a problem. I'm going to listen to you in the moment. I'm going to say it's
yeah,
okay. Da, 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 da. And then 2 weeks later, oh, I'm going to listen to that.
yeah,
And people pick up on behavioural things and emotions.
yes,
And I think fundamentally, in anything, whether that be strategy,
mm,
culture, employee surveys, benefits,
yeah,
if you hear people, and sometimes hearing hurts,
yes,
because sometimes, I've had experiences where I've I've given the team free rein to kind of speak openly and stuff
yeah,
like that, and they've identified that I've the problem in something,
yeah,
and like, cool, it's fine, but it's
yes,
okay, that's fine, and
yeah,
actually, what that's done is it made me a better leader, but also made it a better way of working because
yeah,
we managed to change that based on their narrative.
yes,
So yeah, don't just listen here is
yeah.
probably amongst 1,000 other things that came into my head in that moment.
Yeah, and I think that's a brilliant one. Because the bit for me is the other bit I look at is about, walk the walk or talk the talk and walk the walk. So the bit there is about how you behave and how you come across is then truly how you will set the scene for culture and leadership and kind of development and the area, those kind of stuff. And I find it fascinating when people say, I'm really looking after well-being in my team. And I say to them, do you take a lunch break? And they go, no. And I go, but you're telling your team to do it. So you're not actually demonstrating the behaviors of actually what you're asking your team. So they'll hear you saying take a lunch break. That sounds good. But if you're not demonstrating it, they won't replicate it. So
Yeah,
that's a huge thing for me that I see.
I'm smiling at the moment
Yeah.
because that a short period of time that was part of one of the things, the narrative,
Yeah.
and they called me out on it.
Yeah.
And they said like, what, and I was open. I said, look, I know I'm a hypocrite,
Yeah.
and and things like the strong word, but
Yeah.
but they then reflected that back to me, and
Yeah.
actually, in that moment, they were managing me
Correct.
and they shone a mirror in front of me and
Yeah.
actually it helped me go, do you know what, actually I need to then manage myself better.
Correct.
And there's nothing worse than someone telling you to do something when they're doing the exact
Yes.
thing opposite to the air.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
but the fact that they managed to call me out on it,
Yeah.
again, like that for me showed that that the work that I'd done and the work that they had enabled me to do, because
Yeah.
you can set the framework as a manager, but the credit has to go to the team
Yeah.
because they're the ones that implement it, whether that culture, strategy, or stuff
Yeah.
like that. And actually it was a really poignant moment, and you know, and I did change the way that I was
Yes.
working
Yeah.
in that moment. And so yeah, that's why I kind of had a little bit of a smile on my face when
Yeah.
you used that example.
Yeah. But it's nice that sometimes we do need to take that, and it might be uncomfortable, but that just and somebody says something, you go, oh yeah, that's resonated with me. And also it makes sure that the peers and colleagues feel safe, that they're happy to say it. Really, really important. So um, Aaron, we could talk for a while. You and I had a great conversation before to get to know each other and our beliefs. And we both said, I think our values completely aligned to what we're looking for and talking through. Um, how can people reach out to you or connect with you, Aaron? What's the best way? So if people, connect with you and have a chat, those kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is the world and space. So, you know, you can
Yeah,
find me on LinkedIn, drop me a DM. As I said, I'm
yeah,
always happy for a intellectual, challenging conversation. I mean, it's
yeah,
something that I really value, and I think that's one of the things when we connected. So,
yeah,
yeah, they can obviously go reach out
yeah,
to me LinkedIn,
yeah,
or you know, check out the Liam charity if they are looking for
yeah.
sort of another type of connection.
Yeah, fantastic. And also, I know you've got a new journey coming up with your career as well. So just wanted to wish you the very best of luck with your new career journey as well. So I really appreciate it. And good luck with that from our point of view.
Thank you.
Good. And
Brilliant.
just a huge thank you to Aaron being on our podcast today. So inspiring thoughts. Really, really appreciate it. And I know we'll stay connected from that point of view. But a huge thank you. And thank you for joining today, Aaron. Really, really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.